Okay. Ramesh is requesting everybody to switch on their video. It'll be nice for us to interact, know each other. Awesome. Great. So Ramesh, thank you so much for taking out time for us today. This is these calls are actually community calls for team coaches or people who want to learn about team coaching, and it's an endeavor for us to create more awareness and support coaches learn more about the dynamics of team coaching. So today, um, we're looking at learning from you about how dynamic a team coaching engagement is. But before that, I would like to share with all of you that Ramesh is a very experienced and established coach and actually expert on polarity mapping is how I know him. Been doing team coaching, also runs a course on team coaching from Kucharya. And it's such a pleasure to collaborate with you and learn from you today, Ramesh. Welcome to the conversation.
Thanks, Jaya. And thanks for having me here. And I think this is the beauty of this community, right? It's all about sharing.
Always sharing.
Yeah. And I think the whole learning journey is about that. So I don't know why you call me an expert. I don't think there's anything called expertise in this field of whether it's team coaching or even coaching per se. Each of us are learners. And then that's why I'm here. I'm guessing that a lot of folks on the call would have just as much experience as all of us. So I'm hoping to learn as much as offered from my side. So that's what I'm looking forward to. And that's part of the reason I requested you to come on video, because the fundamental or let me put it this way. I find it very difficult to interact with blank screens. so I prefer to interact with, some human face on the other side, even if it is virtual, and like to see and connect with your emotional state rather than names. So
Absolutely.
yeah, so would love to have all of you on screen, and I'm sure just being there, I'm sure most of you may not know each other, so just being on screen will get you to know each other a little bit better, I suppose.
Absolutely.
Great. So welcome to this forum, and once again, thanks, Jaya. The intent of the program today is not to, it's not about trying to understand what the whole gamut of team coaching is, because I don't think that's even a possibility in an hour's time. Jaya runs her own program on team coaching. I do it in my own way. Even 30 hours of that program doesn't touch even a tiny bit of this whole space. So what we'll actually do is, in a way, try to appreciate, how different working with teams is, vis-a-vis individuals, right? How probably it's important for us as coaches to be agile in a way that suits and aligns to what the team really needs, rather than getting stuck with what we believe is the right way to do things. So, and that's the problem with all structures, right? I mean, structures constrict you, and team coaching is not about getting constricted in any way. So what we're going to be doing today essentially is spending some time. So just a quick hands up to get a sense of how many of you have a reasonable sense of what team coaching is, or have done some team coaching before, or a program on team coaching. 3, 4, 5. So about maybe 25-30% of the group, right? So what I'll do then is maybe just spend some time initially on some fundamentals of team coaching, right? and I'll do it in my own way. I'm not going to be bringing in structures and models and all of that into this conversation because it complicates everything. After which I'll sort of give you a small case, actually a team coaching intervention that I and a partner of mine actually worked on. And we'll try and see how you as individuals or as groups, and we are about 19 of us here, probably a couple of more people might join in as we go along. So we might not have time for everybody to share everything. So we'll probably try and do a small breakout group just to discuss what you would want to do to try and help that client, right? What type of a design in terms of a team coaching intervention you would probably think of, and what would, and why you think that's something which you would want to offer the client. Post which I'll share what was the design that we had, and more interestingly, what we ended up doing, because it was very different from the design, initial design of the whole program, right? And through that, this is a completely interactive session. So feel free to come in. This conversation has been set up for 2 hours. We hope to finish for sure by 2 hours, but if we are done before that, we will close before that. So feel free to come in with any sort of thoughts or interactions, and more importantly, please do share your personal experiences in similar situations, right? And that is most helpful for this forum. So what Jay and I are going to be doing is purely, being a catalyst in terms of igniting some conversations here. Yeah, so I hope that works for everybody. So I see that we still have a few shy people in the group. Is it too early in the morning for everybody? Those who are not on video, I mean. But if you can, please do come on. It makes it a little easier. Yeah. So does this structure work for all of you, or do you have any other expectations? Yeah. So I'm assuming.
Yeah.
Sure. Thank you. So I see a couple of.
Feel free to use the chat. We would like this to be an interactive conversation versus one way. And one of the ways without interrupting is to put it on chat and ask questions that comes in your mind. And there are what I also want to mention, Ramesh, is a lot of people who may not have taken a formal course in team coaching. So we may have to keep adding that to the conversation to say, so that they are getting along in the conversation. So I just
sure. Yeah, and do feel free. Thanks for bringing that up, Jaya. Do feel free to stop me or Jaya, and Sandeep, feel free to come in too. I mean, you're just as.
Thank you, for sure.
Yeah.
Will do.
So do stop us if you have any questions, or you don't understand what is being said. I think that's important. So to start, so there are various models out there, right? I mean, you hear of people like Peter Hawkins and David Clutterbuck, and generally when they talk about team coaching, these are a couple of people who come in mind. They have their frameworks in terms of what team coaching means. So you hear of models like Perel, you hear models like Clear, all of which, and each, I think, individual has their own way of looking at it, right? But fundamentally, team coaching is about taking care of 3 things. I think the fundamental rule, or I wouldn't say rule, the philosophy behind team coaching is about how do you help people speak to each other. So, the term that is like generally used is how do you build connections between people? Because if you can do that, the team figures out how to solve their own issues, right? If they're not connecting and speaking to each other, they're not going to be able to solve their own problems. So team coaching is about helping build those connections. And to help do that, you are the first part of team coaching is about making sure the team knows what they want to achieve. So I call it clarity of purpose. Does a clear team have clarity on what they want to do for themselves? Where do they want to go? What is the outcome they want to achieve? And while trying to figure that out, are they aware of what people around them want them to achieve? So, are they bringing in their stakeholders in terms of trying to understand their expectations and building that into the outcomes that they want? So the first part of any team coaching intervention is that piece, right? Which is about understanding and getting clarity on what the team wants to achieve. The second part of it is once they know what they need to achieve, are they aligned to getting that done? So the alignment part of it is to do with how each individual looks at that outcome. Are they signed up to it? Two is, do they know what they need to do to make that happen? So what is their role in the whole exercise? Do they know what support they need, not only from people in the team, but also from the stakeholders to get that outcome achieved, right? Do they understand what sort of, how will they work with each other? So ways of working. So broadly, the whole piece about alignment has these multiple pieces that needs to get understood or at least appreciated by the team before they can start. The fourth element is all this is good theory, but what happens in practice is very different from what happens in a theoretical conversation. So how do we create forums as coaches for these groups to understand what is really happening there? What is the real dynamic that is working? The commitments that people make, are they really able to do it? If not, what is really going on there, right? So broadly in a team coaching engagement, if you're able to, as a coach, hold these 3 or 4 pieces together, you broadly will get the team to move in the outcome that they want to, right? And finally, underlying all of this, there is a term which, I think Jaya, Sandeep, and I learned from Peter Hawkins called always be contracting. There is a system of this kind is very complex. And there are so many multiple moving parts that there is no way what was intended to happen is going to happen the way we expect it to happen. It's going to happen in multiple different ways, right? So how do we keep making sure the team is engaged, they understand, they learn from what is happening, and then do the course correction that is needed? So that's very broadly. And like I said, all of this, what we spoke about, fits into various models that you'll find out there. All of them are interesting models by themselves. But broadly, philosophy-wise, this is what all those models really talk about. Yeah. Any questions so far before we move on? Anything you want to add, Jaya, Sandeep, to what I said?
I think the key word in the whole team coaching is collective. And how do you bring out common actions through multiple personalities is what team coaching, and that's what the complexity involves, because everybody has a different way of thinking, everybody has different agendas, motivation. And how do you, as a coach, get them to act on something which is common, is the complexity bit of it. And as Ramesh said the other one.
No, I think Ramesh rightly reminded us about the ABC, always be contracting. I think something we all learned from Peter Hawkins, and how very important it is, particularly in team coaching. It's important in individual one-to-one coaching as well, because every time you have a session, despite the coaching goals, you set the agenda, you contract what the session is going to be all about. But the team coaching, the dynamics are very different. much more complex, and nothing stays on course the way you planned it. So you have to be more in the moment. And I think, at every point, try and understand what is the aspirations of the team, what they want to achieve, and how do you course correct. So thanks for that, Ramesh. Thanks for reminding.
Yeah. I have a question.
Sure, Samita.
So what I would like to ask is, this is really what you covered. The 3-4 points are really very important for the team to get what they want. But what happens, when the team that is getting coached is just a subset of the whole team and they don't have all the information? And sometimes what I have had a scenario is that, I have to coach a team, but the decisions are made by someone who, is not transparently communicating to the team. So the team really essentially doesn't know what they want. So they are just looking up to uncertainty, what is going to come, and, working with them to coach them is very difficult.
So yeah, so I'll respond to this, Samita, but what we will do is, just to sort of keep us on track, we are going to have lots of questions of this kind, right?
Yeah.
But so it's going to be difficult to keep answering questions of that kind. We'll probably try and see how to do it in a better way, but I'll try this one. So we talked about coaching connections. You're not coaching a team. You're coaching connections, and connections are not to do with just the team themselves. It's not between purely themselves, right? It's connections also with their stakeholders. Both stakeholders who are clearly visible to them and stakeholders who are not necessarily even clearly their stakeholders. So there are multiple layers of stakeholders, right? There are people who directly work with teams. There are people who are in some way influencing the team. There are people who are getting influenced by the team. All of them are stakeholders.
Right.
And if we expand this even beyond all of this, from a pure systemic point of view, we are talking about stakeholders, even being the society, stakeholders being the ecosystem that you're in, all of it, and in maybe the entire universe, so to say, right? So
yes.
How do you coach groups on working with these connections? So in your case, the case that you spoke about, Sumita, it's about saying, how will the team figure out an effective way of trying to get better information from this particular stakeholder of theirs? It is not the coach's problem to solve. It's the team's problem to solve. So the coach coaches that team to figure that out for themselves. So
thank you.
So I think the most important thing, and thanks for bringing it up, because it's a classic case of the difference between coaching a group or individuals versus coaching connections. So are we cognizant of the difference between these two? You're not coaching individuals, you're coaching connections all the time.
Yeah, and what I would like to bring in, like in one-to-one coachings, you're creating awareness for the individual. Here, you're creating collective awareness about their relationship, about their connections. So that becomes, again, another part of the layer to say, hey, how would you like to take this conversation forward with respect to the person you don't get along or you don't like? And that's the difficult part. So how do you bring them into that safe space to be able to ask that question and for them to feel safe to respond and think about it?
Sure. Thank you.
The reason I said I'm not sure how to handle some of these questions is because there are going to be, like for example, I'm going to possibly use some tools that were used and all that. We end up talking about each one of them. We'll sit here the whole day. So, but this is a great question from a very fundamental philosophy of team coaching. So thanks for bringing that up. So, before I sort of give you a quick idea of what case we are going to talk about, I just want to check in with a group who's still not on video, because we're going to be breaking out into breakout rooms later. are you folks ready and available for breakout rooms? Because I am going to find it difficult to create a breakout room and then not have people in it. Yeah. Okay. So I'm seeing yeses on the chat box. I see one hand up. All right. So I'm guessing everybody is available. Thank you. So here is the case. Okay. So this is the organization that we engaged with, or who engaged us, and I'm using the word we. By the way, the other thing I always prefer is, especially in team coaching engagements, to work with a partner. I rarely try to do it alone. Yeah, because it's extremely difficult. So you noticed even in this particular forum here how Sandeep, Jay, and I are sort of picking up pieces which the other misses, right? Because it's almost impossible for one person to pick up multiple moving parts at the same time. Even in this case too, I had a partner coach with me. So we were. This is a social impact, a mid-sized social impact organization, something like about 100 crores sort of a revenue. Okay, and definition of social impact is so this organization works in the space of family health, things like family planning, mental health, women empowerment, financial inclusion, things like that. So that's the area of work that they do. And their whole objective as an organization is to see how to impact these sectors, right? But today, the way they do it is that they tie up with funding organizations. So typically, people like WHO or the Gates Foundation, individuals or groups that have funds to offer, and in most cases, even come in with saying, this is what we want to do for this particular area of work. So can you do it for us? So this organization today is more like a project manager in terms of using those funds and getting things done on the ground, right? And they want to move from there to becoming an organization. And just to give you a perspective, most of the folks, especially the senior consultants in the organization, have been in this area of work for almost like 7-8 years, right? I mean, so they have their they probably have a very good understanding of their particular what do you want to, if you want to call it, areas of work or scope of work that they work in. So they believe that they can move from being a pure project enabler or enabler of ideas into actually creating their own solutions and bringing in people to help implement that solution that they come up with. And they believe because they are based out of India, they understand the Indian context, that their solutions will be far more constructive and far more impactful than somebody sitting out there with funds who just tells them what to do. Right? So that was the intent with which we were brought in, to help them make that shift. And they were struggling with primarily the challenge of having to run their day-to-day programs, which they're already doing today, versus trying to change the whole structure of the organization and work towards this. And they called it a platform. They actually use the word platform. We want to create a platform and offer that to our clients, right? And for them, the clients are both the funding organization and the recipient. So we were brought in, and this with this sort of a background to give you some idea of who the leadership team is and the group that we sort of worked with. There is a CEO of the organization who's also the promoter. He's the founder of the organization. He's been, it's a 14-year-old organization. He sort of set it up from scratch. A person with a lot of intellectual power. I mean, somebody who loves to write white papers and and create a lot of theoretical assets, if I might call it that. And a COO, a chief operating officer whose role was primarily to run the operations of the company. So, which meant, things like admin, your HR, all of that, recruitment, finding project teams, funding, all of that happens with the CEO's role was that. This guy is all of 31 years old. Okay, so he's literally a kid from that standpoint, but doing a really heavy lifting job. They have four senior consultants, each of them with their own area of expertise. Each of them, one of them who actually was the co-founder in a way of the organization, with the CEO, who started off with the organization right from day one, and the others who came along the way. With the fourth senior consultant was somebody who was still at that point in time when we started the engagement, still working on a consultant basis. It was not a full-time role yet for her. But this was the second group. Again, all of them, except for the first individual that I spoke about, typically with about between 5 to 8 years of experience. All of them are designers, have a design background. So again, very, very theoretically focused way of working. And their focus was on the theory part of it. That's what excited them. Operational roles was something that was not very exciting for these people. Then you had an HR leader who just took over that role because the previous HR head quit the company. And this lady, before she did this HR role, was actually the, in a way, the technical assistant or some sort of an assistant to the CEO, right? So she was doing that role and then moved on to an HR role. So didn't have much of a clue of what HR really meant. And a CFO, brilliant guy, but ended up typically worked more like an accountant than a CFO. So that was his mindset. And in a way, the organization expected him to do that, right? So that's very broadly what the leadership team was like. And of course, there was a lady who headed marketing, but marketing in their definition was, collation of information rather than actually go to market. So I hope I'm able to differentiate the two. It was primarily that. So it was a very inward-facing sort of a role, the marketing role. So this was the leadership team, and they wanted to create this change for themselves, right? So we were brought in, and we were asked to help them with that. So this is a case. So what I'm going to be doing is, do you have any specific questions on what the case is, the context, and things like that before I open the breakout rooms?
Ramesh, maybe we can just summarize it in few words for everyone to get it.
Sure.
Yeah. If you could also specify what was the ask?
Sure. So this was an organization which wanted to move from being a program manager, so to say, managing programs, to actually being able to create programs for themselves and become the focal point of funding and impact on the ground. Okay, and they wanted our help to get them to move in that direction, primarily because they thought they knew what this meant. They just didn't know how to get there. So the question was, so they actually gave us a whole white paper to read saying, this is what a platform means, and we want to get there. Help us figure out how we want to get there. That's really what the brief was.
So Ramesh, sorry, I have a question, Anamika. Just to confirm my understanding, it means the organization wanted to move away from being a project-based organization to an organization which has a longer-term vision, where they can, generate multiple projects at a time and generate revenue from that and so on. Is that right?
Absolutely, and more impact, doing that, more impact on the ground than what they could do today. And probably be more in control of what's happening there rather than being told what to do.
Yeah, totally. Having a vision means they will be. Vision and mission means they will be eventually.
Yeah, absolutely. So that was the brief. Right? So what I'm going to be doing is putting all of you into breakout rooms. What would be nice is for all of you who are in the breakout room to sort of come back in. So we'll spend about 10 minutes there. Just come back in terms of what each of the groups think you would want to do here. And I'm leaving that very broad, right? I'm not even saying come and tell us what is the process you will use, what are the steps you're going to, what approach you will use. It could be anything. What do you think you want to do? Yeah.
So how big was this team, Ramesh? How many people were there?
So this was a group. I mean, I think I listed about 8 odd people. So that is a leadership team. The organization per se is about 40 or 50 folks, plus a lot of part-timers who took part in projects and stuff like that.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's broadly a 3-layer organization: leadership team, a group of managers, and a group of associates. So just 3 layers in that organization. Can I open the rooms now?
Sure, Ramesh.
There are a few people who join later.
Yeah.
So it's a little skewed. The groups are a little skewed, but that's okay, I guess.
Okay. Okay, this seems 5 people haven't joined, right? So I think Sindhu said she's away. Anushli hasn't joined. Katie hasn't joined. Okay, no problem. I think whoever is in the breakout room can start the conversation. Anushli is not joined. Can stop the recording.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wonderful. So let's quickly hear what each of the rooms had. So hopefully one person from the room could, in a minute, share what you came up as a group in terms of what you would like to do.
Yeah, maybe I can go, Ramesh. We were, Hemant, Rama, and I were in the group, and we discussed various things. And I think what we common sort of take was that the why is missing. The why are we doing what we are doing? Once we know why, I mean, the big picture is missing. They're just doing bits and pieces. They don't know, they don't have that common platform where they want to be, all of them, the full leadership team. And I think that piece is missing. And as a team coach, 3 of us would like to first work with the leadership team to figure out their why, and whether or not the whatever CEO brings, everyone is aligned. So they need to be sharing that common purpose for which they are a leadership team.
Okay. Thank you. Yes, Aturish, I see your hand up.
So thanks. So myself and Kathy was in the room, and our point of discussion was actually around why, the same way what Ramika mentioned, but we are more focused that since this organization is growing up into the ladder, because right now today maybe they are maybe at the tier 1 or tier 2, okay, and they want to grow up into the ladder. If that is the case, it means that they're going through a transformational journey. And if it is a transformational journey, so definitely they have to reset their vision and mission. Okay. If their vision and mission is not in place, so maybe that will be difficult for them to understand that what they want to grow in the next 2 years or next 5 years. Okay. And once the vision and mission is set, this is across the organization, then everybody will follow the same principle, the vision and mission. Okay. And based out of that, automatically the job descriptions and other things will be created accordingly. Okay. And then everything will be reset. Okay. So our focus was to sit with the leadership management or leadership or the management team, just to find it out what vision and missions they want to create for the organization in the next couple of years.
Sure. Thank you.
I can go. We had Anish K and Anushli in our group. Very similar threads, purpose. I don't want to reiterate the same thing, but create an offsite maybe where everybody comes, understands who they are, what their strengths, what they bring to the table, where they need help, and understand the purpose, vision, mission, etc. And also from a coaching point of view, see we can start a contracting with the team to see where do they need help from the team coaches. In this case, there is a lot of change management involved in the transition, so work through that. And also you mentioned that the CFO was just doing a part of the job, HR person did not have experience, so there may be a lot of gaps, not only in the skill set but also in who they are and what they bring to the table. So running like a Lencioni's Dysfunctions or some activity like that to create a baseline of what is their connections, what is their relationship, maybe some psychometric things, etc., creates a common language where then we can start and say, this is your vision, mission, etc. This is where you are. This is where we need to improve, and then take the contracting forward.
Thank you, Sailesh.
I can represent Group 1.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
So we had Sandeep, Rohit, and Sindhu in our group in room 1. So what was suggested by Rohit, Sandeep was one is to co-create the vision and with the leadership team, so that they realize that this vision is commonly owned by all, and there's more accountability, and then identify the behaviors that they need to display in order to reach there. So now this when they co-create, this could be the same vision that the CEO has, or it could be somewhere where it comes out as maybe a little tweaked out or something different than what is initially supposed to be. So I also had a thought which I shared, and we were not able to complete that discussion, so I'm bringing it out here in this group, is that since I heard you say that all of them had a lot of intellectual kind of a background, so I was thinking of running a pilot initially with the vision what the CEO had, identify after the pilot was executed with the help of leaders and managers, identify the mistakes that they make, or whether the alignment is there or not. So in retrospect, first implement a small pilot, maybe focus on creating one program, let's say for women empowerment, create that program, execute it as a pilot, and then retrospect whether this is what we want to do ourselves, whether these processes are working or not, whether something needs to be changed, are we liking this way of working, and then have that alignment in the leadership team, saying that okay, this is what we are liking it, and this is what we want the future to be, so let's work on creating it. Or if we don't like the way this is going to be, then what is the new vision or mission we should have as an organization, is what my initial thoughts were.
Thank you.
Okay. Archana, I can go for my group. I was part of group 3, where we had Harleen, Nisha, and Rashmi. So I think we really did not focus a lot on what we should be doing as a process, or what should be the approach. But the larger discussion was around if you need to get to a destination, you need to know your starting point. So where is everyone on the team currently? How are they seeing this? Is everyone rowing in the same boat? Because when you made references of HR, or you said the CFO is not really working, he's looking at it more from an execution mindset rather than, or the marketing team is not really looking at how to go out to the market, but looking at it more inward. So does everyone understand their role? Is everyone currently playing to their full strengths, right? What are the missing links? So just about getting a common alignment on that. And is everyone buying in to that's the vision we want to create for the company? I think that's where our larger discussion bordered around in our group. And a bit of what everyone else said, yes.
Thank you, Archana. So I think we've covered all the groups, right? Great. Thanks, folks. Very rich insights in terms of how you would have approached it. And like we started off saying, there is no right or wrong in this, right? There's the only way to figure out whether something works is to get in there and start with whatever you know, and then keep going with what emerges in the moment. So what we did was this, actually. So we had the same doubts in terms of, when they talked about platform, whether they really understood what it was. And I told you, right, they actually had a white paper, which all the folks in the leadership team had contributed to creating. And it was something like about an 8 or 9 page document. So both of us as coaches believed that they understood what they want, right? They had something very clearly written. So that was the assumption we went with. But then we sensed that, there is something more here. So we actually did a one-on-one conversation with each of the leadership team to get their insights into what they think is working, what is not working, what are the challenges they're facing. So get a good idea of the landscape, right? We also did focus groups with the managers, which is the first line of, with typically folks who are actually on the ground getting things done. So they're the the first level of doers in the organization, and the associates, who are essentially the folks who go out into the field and get things done, right? These inputs that came from all these conversations was that, very dynamic place. I mean, in the sense that things change almost every day, literally, depending on who gets out of the bed which side of the bed they get out of, right? So most people in these groups, especially the manager level, have done multiple roles over the last couple of years. They've never been able to stick on to one role or, one responsibility. Of course, the other issues in terms of finding good people, which is the usual challenges. Hiring is always a challenge for most organizations, especially niche organizations of this kind. It was clearly a bit of a challenge. But more interestingly, they didn't know where they're going as in their own careers and the organization. So there was a lot of hesitation in terms of actually being fully there for the organization. So that's the sense we got from the conversations here. After which we got the whole leadership team together for a 2-hour sort of just a conversation, right? In terms of what we see, what we think is probably the best way to, and by the way, all of this are the hypothesis we went with is they know what they want because of that white paper, which was very complex, which we didn't understand, which meant that it was a great idea, right? So that was the hypothesis we went with. So we went in and had this conversation with them, talked about what we heard, what we believed is probably the best way to go ahead. And one of the areas which was clearly coming through is the fact that everybody was operationally focused. There was very little time people spent on getting to know each other. And by the way, all this, we're talking about a program we started in just after COVID started. Okay, so we were first contacted in Jan last year, and we started getting into action in Feb and March. So they've already been through a situation where they've been disconnected for a year. You could actually see on calls that people don't come on videos, for example, right? I mean, everybody is purely talking. I mean, it's just a voice you hear, and they've been doing that for a year between themselves. In between all this, the CEO, anyway, Delhi is closed, so he's moved to Goa. The CFO is moved to somewhere in Himachal. Okay, so everybody is working out of a different part of the country, except the project teams which are primarily on the ground. So that was the context of and the complexity here. So we help them sort of understand what's really happening, and also this whole challenge around not really talking to each other, right? So one of the things we actually suggested is we'll do a module on emotional intelligence. So that was one part of it. The second part of it is the workshop in terms of defining what or how they need to get to the vision that they want to create for themselves. And that was designed as a 4-day workshop, virtual, 4 hours a day over an entire week. Okay. So we got a sign off on that. They all agreed to all of this. And the mistake we made is that we did that workshop before we did the EI piece of it, because we wanted them to at least know what they want for themselves before we start doing the EI workshop. Right? And the workshop went on very well. So we brought in multiple approaches to help them understand. So we use, for example, I don't know if you've heard of Vijay Govindarajan's 3-box grid or 3-box solution, right? To help them define how to get to their platform piece. The second part of the workshop is in terms of saying, now that you know where you want to go, what is it from a behavior standpoint we all need to start displaying in order to get there? The third part of the workshop was where they actually made commitments for themselves. So we actually got them to do a feed-forward conversation between each of them. So there were 7 or 8 of them. Each person did a feed-forward conversation to the other, right? So at the end of those 4 days, they had a sense of 2 things. So one was a revelation that they thought they knew what a platform meant. Okay, and so the biggest outcome that came out of the workshop is to create a task force to define it clearly. They picked up one portfolio, which was, if I remember right, the family planning portfolio, where they had a lot of experience in saying we'll create a platform of this first before we talk about the others. So they, I think one of the groups talked about a pilot, right? So they chose that as their pilot. And then they said, we'll give ourselves 3 months to define what a platform should really look like. And what will we do in those 3 months? We will start working together and making sure we start exhibiting some of these behaviors. So what we said as coaches is that, how do you know you're making progress? So they sat down and actually created a project plan for themselves for those 3 months. We offered to be part of the reviews for those projects, the progress of those plans, which they wanted to do twice a month. So we offered to be part of those project reviews. And that's how we sort of closed that workshop. Now the first project review went on well. The second project review, gaps started showing. So at the end of 1 month, whatever was committed was not happening, right? And by the time we reached the third, the second month or the third project review, they ran out of money. So there was a financial crisis. They were, and partly, sort of, the whole thing was exaggerated because of COVID. And sorry, there's also one more thing we did. We actually got them to do an assessment on how much they trusted each other. We also got them to do what is known as a relationship affinity mapping at the end of the 4-day workshop. And we did a one-on-one coaching conversation with each of them on those two tools, so to say, right? In terms of what has come up for each of them, so that we get a sense of where everybody is and things like that, right? But so at the end of this 1.5 months, they ran out of money. And that was the first indication that all this is great, but the way we are designed as an organization is all wrong. So we can create a platform, but even if we create a platform, if we continue to work the way we do, it's not going to work. So we called them in for a 2-hour group coaching workshop to actually define what is it that will make them a successful organization which will sustain. And clear answer was, we have to be financially stable, because it has hit them, and most of them had to take pay cuts. So it hit them really bad, right? So the question then we asked is, if you have to have an organization which is financially stable, what will need to change? And they didn't have an answer for that. In a way, I had to prompt them saying that you have to be a outward focused organization, you're inward focused. All of your theoretical guys, all of you are working on areas that excite you, and nobody is running after figuring out where the pipeline is and where the revenues are. That was a clear behavior that we started seeing in 1.5, 2 months, right? Everybody is very excited with new ideas. There is no focus on where the next contract is coming from. And that fundamentally completely turned this whole thing upside down. No longer was this platform an important thing. All that they wanted now is to figure out what this meant for them, right? And then a lot of these dynamics started. And what we also did is, actually the CEO approached me saying, Ramesh, I don't understand what this whole thing will mean for me. I want one-on-one coaching. So I said, yes, I will coach you. The next thing that happened is the CFO came, and here was somebody who was always sitting on the sideline, because he was purely a accountant, right? He had actually no stake in all this. All he had to do was publish the balance sheets and the P&L. That was his role, and he was very good at managing, external, what do you call it, stakeholders like taxation and all of that, right? I mean, he was very good at it. That was his strength, really. He came to me saying, I think I can do more. And then I said, why don't we have a joint conversation with your CEO? And the CEO actually, in that 3-way conversation, he actually said, yes, I want you to be a CFO. You're a CFO, but you're not a CFO. That's the first time he's telling this gentleman what his expectation is, right? The third thing that happened is, there was, I told you, one very senior consultant who was really part of the journey right from the beginning. She was not ready to move into a revenue focused or have revenue numbers on her head. She is saying that is not who I am. I cannot do it, right? And at the end, we did that group workshop, and at the end of it, each one of them signed up saying, we will take charge of our revenues. We will make sure that we own revenues. And that was a sign off that all of them did. And here was one lady who's coming, 2 weeks later saying, this is not what I can do. Then a second consultant, started creating problems on the back end. So the CEO said, Ramesh, I want you to coach him. I said, yeah, I will coach him if he wants to be coached. And we had a conversation. At the end of it, this gentleman, basically said, I don't think I need coaching. And I said, then why are you finding it difficult for people to work with you? So there was lots of these, and here is the other interesting thing. The trust instrument actually talked about a very trusting organization. And everything started unraveling after this. After the whole focus changed. So the first thing that we needed to sort out was all these individuals. So then we said, we are going to coach each of you. So all of them, all the entire leadership team, we started doing one-on-one coaching for the next 3 months. One of these senior consultants at the end of 2 months decided to quit because clearly he was not aligned to what was changing. And the CEO was very clear that's the only way the organization can go. And when we had a group conversation, he said that bluntly. He said, either you're on the bus or you're off it. So there's no two ways. So one of them decided to leave. The second was this lady who emotionally is so attached to the organization, but is not able to change. So I had to coach the CEO in terms of saying, how do you manage this conversation? So this lady started coaching with my colleague. So she had a coaching, I think about 4 or 5 coaching conversations, at the end of which she was very clear she's not going to change. So as we speak now, it's been about 6 months they've taken but they've sort of decided that they need to part ways. But it took them a lot of time because of these sort of emotional bonds they have with each other, right? And the CEO is not able to let her go. She doesn't want to let go, but they just can't get along. I mean, this was she had to part ways. So right now the separation conversation is going on. The marketing teams clearly had to step up. The CFO, interestingly, was one of the easiest people I ever coached. I mean, here was a guy with huge amount of potential who was not even sure what his role was. The minute he sorted out what his role was, he stepped up. And today he leads conversations on, so they have a revenue outlook conversation every 10 days, and this guy leads it. Right. So behaviors have started changing now. We are still working in that program. So this is a great case, at least in my mind, of what we thought was needed versus where we ended up. So today the focus of the organization is purely on getting into and becoming a revenue focused organization, and stated goal is very clear. We want predictability on our revenue. That's the clear goal right now. Everything else has become secondary.
Interesting, very interesting. So 2 things I could clearly see in this case, Ramesh, was number 1, the lack of systemic perspective.
Yeah.
And number 2, when the culture is too much towards innovation and bonding, and they're so inward that they're busy in their own play, and they just not have the business side of the whole setup. And it's all about what I want to do and what's good for me. While in some organizations, we actually have to cultivate that, right? So where's the balance? The conversation is, where's the balance? Because this seems like a very nice, happy place where everybody is doing their own thing, but completely losing sight to systemic perspective and the business revenue. So these are 2 things I'm actually just highlighting for myself.
Yeah, and actually, I think it was Sailesh's group which talked about it, right? The roles and responsibilities were not clear. So we actually asked them to hire a consultant because the HR leader doesn't have the capacity to do that, capability to do that, right? She's not trained to do that. So they have hired a HR consultant to help them through the whole organizational restructuring piece, right?
I'm also
Go ahead,
Smita, you and then Archana.
So for me, what is when I'm seeing as a correlation between most of if I talk about myself also, when I started my organization, as a coach, we get so involved with innovation, and there's hardly any focus on the revenue generation. It's all inward focused, so a lot of ideas are there, a lot of lot of ideas to create something of value is there, but there is no focus on the revenue part. So it's very insightful what you just shared, and this whole case study as such, it's and it's very difficult to see it from within, being a part of the team itself. So a person from the outside is able to see and sense what is there, what is not aligned together. Maybe some people are not aligned, maybe even the mission and vision is not aligned together, so that's why things are not working. It's very insightful. Thank you for bringing this up today, and I'm really grateful, Jaya, for organizing this for all of us. Yeah, and Ramesh.
Thanks, Sumita. Hemant, can Archana go before you? I see your hand up, or she was trying to come in earlier.
No problem. Absolutely.
Thank you. First of all, I couldn't agree more with Sunita. A brilliant session in terms of, actually seeing a real case study which went live, and, what worked, what was the approach you did, where you redirected. What I just wanted to know, Ramesh, was that is it common that this was largely a team coaching intervention and where some individual coaching also happened? So is it common to do that, or what is your recommendation there?
So typically the guidance around it, and Jaya, feel free to give in your own views. The guidance around it is to avoid individual coaching, right? But this is the second time in my different teams that I worked with where I ended up doing individual coaching. The first one was an organization which was a startup where we sort of worked with them on the strategy part of it. And then post that, so typically the way I do it is we have this first workshop where you get people together and they work out and all these pieces around clarity of purpose and the alignment piece, all that gets done. And we do a one-on-one conversation with all participants just to get a sense of where everybody is on the alignment, because that's something which doesn't come out in an open group scenario, right? So that's why we do a one-on-one conversation with them. In that conversation, we realized that a lot of people, so I'm talking about the startup, where a lot of people didn't fully understand, how to work on the behaviors that they committed to. So they wanted coaching. So we ended up, actually doing some, I think about 6 months of one-on-one coaching before we continued with the rest of it. In this case, we ended up with by default there because there was lots of underlying issues here which started coming up when the whole, when the push comes to shove and when stresses start building up, right? People need to speak, and I think that's where it started off, but then it became a coaching conversation.
Thank you, Ramesh.
Jay, you want to add anything to that? Your thoughts on one-on-one?
Yeah, so typically we try to avoid it because you get into another complications by, somebody's talking to you and they want you to resolve something which is politically aligned. And so you just increase the complexity by getting into one-to-one conversation. You avoid as much as possible. Once you have done some group work, some alignment has come, and then it's a little bit of, so I take one-to-one and team coaching as a rapport building exercise and not coaching exercise. Right? I want them to start listening to us. I want them to start aligning. And I also, in those one-to-one conversations, start setting the expectation that we'll talk together. Let's talk together. So that they also understand that no one-to-one agenda will be entertained. And then you get them into team coaching scenarios. And still, there are few people who need that attention. At times, some people need to be heard. So just doing the listening piece of it and not really coaching them, but just providing them place to feel safe. And at times when they do a couple of conversations, when they blurt it out and then they feel more safe in the group, that's also right. So you have to sense. There is no formula here. You have to sense who needs what at times, but don't set the rule of one-to-one coaching in team coaching, because then it becomes an expectation. And then once there is an expectation, then there is also an expectation to solve what they have told you. So that's what I would say. So keep it very tentative. Do not promise. Just do case-to-case basis. That's what I would say.
Yeah. Anamika, Hemant is waiting and we have Rashmi with a hand up, if you don't mind.
Sure. Just as a comment on the whole team coaching and coaching the team and coaching individual, but I'll hold it.
Sure. Hemant, you want to come in?
So I will just share one of my experience, and I'm not sure where we fit in the entire conversation. What I have been doing is I move into a project stage and then I get into operations. In terms of I'm a hotelier. I've been into hotelier for 2 decades now, and I've opened 4 hotels so far. So I get into hotels when they are at construction stage. Then we hire a set of people. And these are the same people who, have to get into operation and start generating money. And when I heard all these things about the scenario that you shared, Ramesh, is what I realized is people who are good at launching a product are not the same people who might be good at getting business. And so over a period of time, it is a very common saying that people who open hotels, the pre-opening team, which we call them, are very closely bounded because at the end of what happens is they are responsible for their individual areas to come into operations, and they are not linked with each other somehow. So, they directly report to the general manager and they are not closely related. But when operations start, everything becomes a very close knitted web. And that is where a lot of talking starts, and that is where things start falling apart. So in my experience of opening past 4 hotels, I've always let a pre-opening team go, in the sense, because what they were great at, there's some people who are great at like training and coaching people, giving them training, but when it comes to making money, probably they are not the right ones. So out of my experience, I think the one so in this context to what you were saying, probably because the CEO was the person who also started the company and a lot of people were right there from the beginning. I think it's just like becoming a mother and becoming a father. Somebody has to go out and get money and somebody has to stay inside the house and take care of it. So I can relate what you were saying, and those are, I think, skill sets. And in our business also, there's a turnaround that every 2 years we have to churn out people. Reason being, after 2 years, you tend to become stagnant, you get into a comfort zone, and it requires a new skill set. So that's what I have to share, because market is changing when you talk about team coaching, and when about the performance of revenue and competitiveness, because every time there's a huge competition that's growing around. Skill set, what there was 24 months back, does not relate anymore today. So yeah, that's what I wanted to share.
Thanks, Hemant. And that's actually true even for startups. One of typically end up coaching startup founders because they start becoming, what's the right word? Not getting the right word, but they start coming in the way of the business after the startup becomes successful.
Yeah, in the sense, what happens is, I will just share my personal experience. When you open a business, you tend to get very emotionally attached with a particular team member, because in a journey, a team member goes through a lot of things. Because when you hire, you actually help them settle down, maybe house or family. They go through a lot of situations in their life. You are standing with them. And when you open the business and when they're not able to perform, it becomes very difficult to have that tough conversations. Listen, you are not able to do that. So I faced that challenge when I was for first initial 6 months, and before I had to put a foot down that no, I have to have that tough conversation. So it's difficult, to be very honest.
Thanks.
Yeah,
thanks.
that's it. I will take a pause.
Sure, thanks, Hemant. Rashmi, you want to come in, and Anamika after that?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for this wonderful conversation and this session. There were some thoughts which were just coming in my mind, and I thought I'll share as Archana was talking about, this point of individual coaching versus team coaching. And I was wondering that as a part of this team coaching process, if we really need to sometimes coach the team leader. And if that happens on a one-on-one basis, do you think that is something that is appropriate? And because I think that is sometimes it can give very different perspectives in terms of where the leader is and where the whole team is, and then bringing them together could be very insightful. So the question here is basically, as coaches, do we kind of get them all together as a group, or maybe first have some one-to-one coaching sessions with the team leader as well?
So those are clearly the decisions you will take on the ground, Rashmi, because it depends on the context, right? But in a way, I go back to what Smita asked right at the very beginning. And typically in organizations where you're coaching a team where they're just part of one of the teams in an organization, there are going to be other stakeholders who actually drive the direction for the team. So how do you get the team to get aligned with them and them to get aligned with the team? So you have to be able to help the team figure that out, and that's important, right? And if there is a possibility, it's always good to get key stakeholders included into the in some form into the framework. If not anything, at least to come in and talk about what they expect. So somewhere get them psychologically involved with the whole process.
Yeah, yeah. And also, I think in terms of what you shared was very valuable, Ramesh, about this whole thing on people losing focus on the big picture in terms of the business revenues. And I think that primarily happens when they become very inwardly focused and probably are not able to see the perspective from various different stakeholders' perspective as to how they are creating value for different stakeholders for the organization, their customers, their suppliers, etc. So there could be various stakeholders that they might be kind of interacting with on a day-to-day basis. So the moment their just focus shifts from what I'm just doing in my day-to-day versus how am I creating value to all these stakeholders who are aligned to me, I think that could just help them shift that broader perspective. Thank you. That's the thoughts that I wanted to share.
I also sense that there has to be some things we have to say no to in order to create more time to do the things that we want to. So
when you say we, who's that, Samita?
So I'm talking from the case study perspective, so if they have to shift their focus from operations to creating their own programs and owning them up. So there might be some decisions they will need to take as to few, what they are executing, if it is not aligned with where they would like to be. So some of those programs they might have to let go also, is what I'm also sensing, though there is a ask for financial stability, but in order to create time for ourselves is also, one of the thoughts that is coming to me right now.
Absolutely. So most of these frameworks, whether it's a 3 horizon framework or like I talked about here, we used Jay Govindrajan's 3-box solution. All of them actually has one box to do with what you want to let go. That's a conversation that always happens. Anamika, you want to come in? And then Saptarishi.
Yeah, I just wanted a comment and just wanted everyone's sort of stamp on that, whether my thinking is correct or no. With respect to coaching a team and one-on-one coaching at the same time. So my thinking on that is, I come from the school of thought in how I learned. So for me, team coaching the team as well as coaching 1:1 the team members can be quite sticky. It can make the whole engagement very complex, the team coaching engagement. So my thought is that we might have two options. One is if we identify that there is a need for every member to be coached, we refer another coach who can do one-on-one. Or the second thought could be that depending on the situation or the context, we do these one-on-one conversations after the team coaching is majorly over. If you can park, if you are able to park, if you are not able to park those behaviors, because they are sort of coming in way of team coaching performance or improvements. So in that case, we might have to refer. And with respect to the team leader, coaching the team leader, there might be, if we identify in the beginning, scoping time and discussions, if we identify that actually, it's important for us to coach the team leader first before we take up the team coaching assignment, then that might be a better thing to do. So just some thoughts here on team coaching and one-on-one. I wanted what you think, both you and Jaya. Thank you.
Thanks, Anami. So it's broadly what we said earlier, right? Try and avoid coaching individuals as much as possible. And what you said makes a lot of sense. Get a third party to coach them if it is possible. In this case, we decided to do that ourselves because we built actually quite a lot of trust with them. They literally trusted us completely to the extent that they didn't even want the HR consultant. They said, "No, you help us." We said, "No, that's not an area of expertise. We don't want to go there." Right.
So a follow-up, sorry. So just a follow-up. So did you face any challenges as a result of you coaching one-on-one in parallel to the team coaching?
So the good news, we were coaching all of them. We ended up coaching the entire leadership team, every one of them. And there was only one individual who didn't refuse to be coached, and he ultimately, he was asked to leave the organization. Very clearly, he was not fitting in. I don't think there's a right answer for any of this in any case. It is you go with your gut as a coach. We were very comfortable doing it, and I think the team was too. I didn't sense anything otherwise, right? Like I said, the trust instrument we used showed up a lot of trust between themselves. To the extent in the group conversations, they were blunt about what they felt. They said what they had to say. The only challenge that they had as a group so far is that nobody ever asked them, right? Or actually the CEO was quite a overpowering guy. I mean, he always had, came in and said what he had to say and get out. I mean, that type of guy, right? So there was no opportunity to talk and speak, but they were comfortable doing it. They worked together for so long. There was a lot of comfort saying it. They just needed that space to say it. And it was a very tough situation for a lot of them because they had to listen to each other, right? They've not done that before. So, though we had set up 4 hours per day, almost except for the 4th day, all other sessions overran by 2 hours because we forced them to listen. We actually said, we are completing the agenda, but you will listen to each other. The only thing we did is we took a lunch break in between. So we ended up with 6 hours every day.
What was the trust instrument you used, Ramesh?
It was a completely homegrown thing, Archana. I saw that message from Sailesh also. So actually, I learned about it I did a program on ontology. So they use something which essentially so it talks about sincerity in how sincere are people with you and how sincere are you with others, or how you sense the other, literally how you sense the other. What level of competence do you see with people around you? Are they reliable? So things like that. I mean, few very simple ways of doing it. So we just use something of that kind. But there are lots of these instruments out there, available out there. I'm not a fan of assessments, by the way. So I'm the wrong person to ask about tools and assessments. I somehow believe that they come in the way.
So interestingly, there is a wheel there's a wheel called permission wheel, which can also be leveraged as trust, to just do the assessment on trust. So maybe you can look up for it. Just type permission. From a long time. Can we invite him, Ramesh?
Yeah, Saptaresh. Thanks for your patience.
No problem. Okay. So one of my role, actually, I just try to share something with you and also try to get your advice, because this is also a real-time case study for me. Okay, just to share with you. So one of my role is actually as a VC. Okay, so I invest into the organization with the help of my groups. Okay. And we invest into various startups. And one of the startup, the guy came from a corporate background, but the product is very rock solid, what we saw. But he created a kind of a core value for the organization. Okay, I mean to say that his startup. And the core value is something like freedom to act for one another and passion to win. Okay. And when he created this core value for this organization, what happened, that they're conflicting according to us, because freedom to act means in the sense you can do anything. He's asking all the people basically to become a kind of a entrepreneur by yourself. Okay. Then passion to win, obviously it is leading to anybody can lead to any product to any kind of areas. Okay. And then he also asking about freedom, I mean to say that for one another. Okay. So core values are very conflicting. So the first few months we observed and we saw that, yes, really the product has a value. Okay. But then they started creating one after another platform. And you know that as a startup, you cannot have that much liberty to build a platform one after another. It will be adding up the cost because of the maintenance and other things that will be adding up. Okay. We try to talk to the CEO and try to talk to him, find it out that is any possibility to stop this platform and then just go for the core product at the first. Okay. And then he can start looking into the platform after another. He didn't stop. And then ultimately we asked him to go. Okay. And we elevate one of the team members to become as a part of the CEO that point of time. Okay. And then basically it started working, but okay, it is not that smooth. And then after that, we did a disinvestment. Okay. So is there any better way to solve this? This is basically the questions, or rather what we did as a wrong thing or right thing. I have no idea, because it was almost like also during the time of the peak COVID. Okay. And at the same time, I would say that basically, I think always we thought there could be a better room to understand him better, but we never did that quite well. That's my feeling.
So I have a question here, Saptareshi. What was your role here?
My role was over here more as a VC.
Right. So the question is, so the answer is, going to be from a VC standpoint, which probably you will do what you had to do at that point in time, which is to get your business running, right? But as a coach, you probably wouldn't do all that. So see, that's the important thing of being a coach, right? You have to be clear on which hat you're wearing, because you can't wear two hats. It's going to confuse you. It's going to confuse the group that you're working with, and you will end up in dilemmas as to what's the right thing to do. But as a coach, you're always a third party. You don't have anything but the team's benefit as your objective. Whatever is right for the team is right. That's it.
Okay.
And if the team believes that constructing multiple products is the right way to go, as a coach, you don't have a view on that. Okay. That's the team's choice, and they have to learn. So they will learn from having done it. So they may fail, they may succeed, but they have to learn. So your role as a coach is to help them learn that as to what went right, what went wrong, and if something has gone wrong, what would they want to do different. So as a VC, your role is completely different.
Okay, I think I mixed up the role over here. Yeah, understood. Clear.
Great conversation, folks, and extremely engaging.
I just had a quick comment on the trust. Thank you for sharing your own instrument. I feel that some of the relationship type questions we get from some of these tools like Clutterberg and all have a lot of elements of trust that you can use. And I use Lencioni's, I know you don't like models, etc., but it's just 20 basic questions where the trust they measure is not, I know you well, I trust you to do the job, but more vulnerability, vulnerability-based trust they measure very effectively. And you can use that in a Mentimeter type scenario without any licenses, etc., and very quickly gauge the trust between the teams. So I've been using that. And another.
So what is the name, Sailesh? Can you repeat that?
No, it's basically Patrick Lencioni has a tool called Dysfunctions of a Team. In that, there are 20 questions you can, for example, if you're running this for a team of 20 or 15, you can use Mentimeter to run it without really buying the tool. It's just 20 questions. You get aggregate the answers very quickly. And the advantage of running in Mentimeter is that it's anonymous. Nobody knows what they have done, and they are very authentic. Yeah, so that was very, very interesting one. Another comment I had was a lot of people who work in complicated jobs where they have one boss in one part of the world, a second boss in India, a third boss, multi-reporting and etc. What I've seen is that my little experience in team coaching, bringing in partners in addition to customers and stakeholders helps. So you have a team that is giving a service, and another team is taking that service, and together they're serving another customer, and all three together are serving the end customer of the company, for example. In the team coaching conversation, when we do the 360 and other things, if we involve those partners, because they have the connection problems and problems between them, along with the end stakeholder who has the complete thing, can help. So that's just something I wanted to share.
Thanks. Absolutely. Thanks for sharing that, Sailesh. Absolutely.
Thanks. But great session. Really appreciate Jaya you coming and giving us a live example. Thank you.
I just have a comment on what Rashmi was mentioning about coaching the team leader. See what has, and the other thing about, coaching leaders one-to-one and then doing the team coaching as well. So number one, the first one, right? When you coach the team leader, you are also expecting the team leader to go and coach the team. Number one. So you're not treating the whole setup as one, right? So there is a differentiation there. Number two, when the team leader is getting coached, that person is also having an expectation from himself or herself that there is something that they need to fix within the system. So the first disparity starts coming in, because now we are not saying everybody has the responsibility to make the change. We are saying the team leader has the responsibility to make the change. In a way, we are also assuming that the person is at fault or they have something to be fixed. Now, that's a change we want to bring in team coaching or group coaching, because you're trying to tell everybody, hey, well, we all are holding the thread together. It's not that the team leader is the person who's holding the thread and everybody has to follow. It's not like that. Everybody has to take accountability. So that psychological difference starts coming in. Second point around when you coach people one-to-one as well as in team, what starts happening and what I have seen in my case is, when I'm talking to them one-to-one, they have built a relationship with me. Now they're not paying attention in the team settings. And I saw clear disengagement there, because they were like, okay, I'll talk to her separately. And I had to call it out and say, I'm not seeing that you are bringing things to the table. So they bring things in one-to-one, and they hesitate to bring things on one-to-one to just in a team setting, because they want to avoid conflict. And then I had to really call it out, ask them what's going on. And the outcome of that was that they needed a different coach to do one-to-one and a different coach to do team coaching. And we made that change in between. So these are some of the dynamics, especially psychological dynamics, which are not very visible, but get called off if you just pay more attention to that. So I just wanted to bring that up.
Yeah, thank you, Jay. I think that was really important. And I think a team leader coaching, I think the overall objective shouldn't be like for the team leader to become responsible for the whole situation, but maybe just to help the team leader also look at the situation from different perspectives, so that he stops probably seeing himself as, the person to be responsible for all the, issues, and just take his whole team to take the ownership. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, again, no right and wrong things, but just be aware of these subtle dynamics which appear, which we at times kind of, we don't know what's playing in the background.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Awesome.
And,
yes.
I don't know if it is related to this, but I have a question about, the commercials and the pricing of such an engagement, which is so dynamic and keeps on changing. How one can, even think about it in the beginning, because you are always sensing and something new is always coming up, something is changing. So how does one think from that perspective?
I was wondering why this question has come up.
Yeah, that's
so Sumita, again, the challenge is if you're ending up contract dealing, you're signing a contract with a sourcing team, then you're in deep shit, okay? Because there's very little you can do. But if you're contracted directly, say with the CEO or the group that whom you are working with, it becomes a little more easier. But yeah, I don't think there's a straightforward way to manage this. But you have to have some sense of the cost, because finally, end of the day, the organization has to budget for it.
Yeah, because most of the organizations, I sense, is they want to be safe, be safely knowing of how much this intervention is going to cost for me, and is what I usually get. So yes. I'm just because in my experience, one of the team coaching assignments, it was a group coaching, but it all ended in one-to-one coaching for each, because there was such a high emotional resistance from each of the team members, and it was not coming out in the group, because of course, working online has kind of disturbed the rapport and the comfort the team is having together, in the presence of each other, is what I sensed as a coach for them. But that came out, in individual coaching, that the whole assignment, the nature of the whole thing changed. Whereas we had scheduled, I had kind of planned initially for more groups coaching sessions and no one-to-one interventions, but it all ended in the opposite way.
Yeah, these are some tricky.
Just give me a minute. Somebody's at the door. I'll just come back.
Sure, Ramesh. These are some tricky situations that comes up, and then how do you maybe provide support and then come back to the group intervention? Because like especially in the pandemic situation, people needed to talk one-to-one, but not making it a process, right? Just giving one-off support when they need it, keeping it like as and when needed, rather making it a process, and then bringing, because the more and more you do group work, the more and more easier it is for you to align everybody. It may take some time, to take off, but once it is done, then the process becomes easier, because then they drive the whole agenda rather than you driving it. So that's what I would say. Yes, Rohit, you've been raising your hand.
Yes, sorry. So my question was that what was the main learning from this case study, and what Ramesh would have done differently now after, reflecting back to
Ramesh, you got a interesting question. Rohit is asking you, what did you learn from this coaching study? This study, what will you do differently if you get another chance?
So Rohit, the only lesson is, to go with what is needed and done, do what is right, because I don't think, and that's the whole fundamental philosophy of working with teams, right? You just do what is right. I don't think I'd have done anything differently initially. In any case, I don't think, some of what happened, had probably was accelerated by the environmental situations, which is, COVID and stuff like that, but probably was a good thing to happen, because if it hadn't happened, the team would not have realized what their biggest issue was, right? So I don't know whether I would have done anything very different. I think theoretically the approach was right. What ended up happening was different, and in this case it was starkly different. I mean, that is what happened.
Ramya?
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Jaya, for organizing this, and thank you, Ramesh, for a wonderful session, sharing your experience. That was really great. I just have a question. I recently joined a new organization, and I have a big team sitting across the globe in different places, and everything is virtual. The whole setup is all virtual, and the team sits in Brazil, US, UK, Netherlands, India. So how to do the icebreaker in this case? How to first tie up the entire setting before I even start trying a team coaching, or even getting into how does the team get into a setup for you? How did you start that? Because the minute you say somebody's going to be coached, there is some sort of resistance from in different directions. The cultures are different again. So how do I just need tips if you can? How do we break the ice here?
So Ramya, I'm hearing that you're actually talking about managing a team. You're not really talking about coaching a team, right?
Not exactly managing. I am also expected to coach the team. So that's coming to my agenda slowly. I mean, when I was also hired with some of the coaching experience, and then so they did want that to happen. So I have not started doing that yet, but that's coming my way. So I just want to know what would be the best way to start it.
So best way to start it, sorry, it's a blunt answer. The best way to start is to decide whether you want to be a team lead or you want to be a coach. You can't do both.
Also, isn't it maybe Jaya and Ramesh, you can help. Even if you are in a corporate situation and you're a coach, you should not typically coach anybody in your line org. That is just a mandatory rule. You can coach other people, other orgs who are not reporting to you, Isn't that
Yeah, in this case, no, they are, nobody's reporting to me. I am a third person for them right now.
Okay.
Nobody will be reporting to me. I will not have any direct reports whom I'll be coaching. So it's a different setup here. So the line managers are separate. I am brought in here as an enabler for them.
Got it.
So they are undergoing a safe transformation, and I've been brought up as an enabler for them. So how do I first? So I'm just starting. I'm just building rapport right now with people. So how do I kind of get into the icebreaker with different cultures, different mindsets? Have you faced anything of similar sort? I just haven't started yet, so just want to know what's the best way.
So, Ramya, a couple of things can be done. Number one, what can come from one-to-one interaction cannot come in the group. So I always like to connect with people whom I need to work with one-to-one to build a rapport and then start the group work. So for you, maybe you can try that. Then there are very good tools available, like somebody said, Mural and Miro, Mentimeters, and there are enough and more tools to conduct the activity. But for people to become receptive, rapport building through one-to-one conversation before you get into any team activity is always helpful. I mean, they need to know your intention, why you coming, why you saying, why you trying to do this, why should they do it? And being an adult, we don't want to listen to instructions, right? So I need that assurance that I'm not in danger. It's safe. It's done for overall good. So that explanation at times may take a little bit of energy in the beginning, but then see how you can communicate. And if it is very large, then you will have no other option but to communicate your intention through some public conversations, town halls or public conversations or group conversations or group video conferencing or whatever it is. But it is important that they understand your intent and they understand what you're trying to do and how is it beneficial for them individually and as a company. But that safety is required by everybody for any initiative.
So first I have a one-on-one as a rapport building to start with.
I'm saying that's one of the option. I like doing
one
that.
Of the options.
You see what works for you, right?
Can I add something?
Sure, Sumita.
So what worked for me, in one of the assignments was the first session being group session. It was all introductions, and then I shared about the intent of the whole intervention, and then I asked them as to what hat do they want me to wear for the intervention to be useful for them. And that is when some of them said, I need a mentor, I need a coach, I need group sessions, I need one-to-one sessions. So they all came out with what they thought their needs were. But yes, then it was something, since they had brought it forth, so it was more acceptable, they were more aligned to what they needed in the intervention to flow.
That's a good
Just
idea.
my thought.
Yeah, asking people what they want and then trying to align your intervention there is also helpful. Okay, I see Katie has raised her hand.
Yes, just a quick question, noting Ramesh's remarks about you cannot or you need to decide whether you want to be a team lead or a team coach because you can't do both. I'm curious, is your position that this concept of leader as coach is not viable? It's not a real thing.
Oh, great question, Katie. So so here's my perspective on leader as a coach, right? So how do you? So what is a coach? A coach has predominantly 3 or 4 competencies, right? Which is to do with listening, which is to do with being open without judgment and asking the right questions, all of that, right? So all those competencies. In any role that you do, whether you're a leader, whether you're a human being, whether you're a mother, you're a father, you can actually use all these competencies. And that's what being a great human being is. So my view is that you can be a great human being, which is taking a coaching stance in every conversation that you have. And taking a coaching stance is being able to talk to another person or a group of people without any judgment on what is happening there. If you are able to hold that stance, that is a coaching stance. So a leader as a coach is is that type of a person. Whereas a coach, being a coach is a slightly different role, because you don't have the responsibility of making things happen for the organization. And that's the key difference, right? So how do you still, as a leader, be able to manage and balance the two in terms of being directive if needed, being able to listen when it is needed, being able to push when it is needed, being able to get out of the way when it's needed. And that's what leadership is about. That's the way I look at it. So leader as a coach is actually about helping individuals start thinking that way. Whereas typical leadership is about running behind, it's always about action, and that is where the problem starts. Can you step back? Can you start looking at things with a different perspective? And actually avoid judgment. I mean, people stop being judgmental. Every workplace becomes a wonderful place to work. Sorry, a very philosophical response, Katie.
Well, it was a very philosophical question, so it's an apt response. Thank you.
And I think to add to that, what coaching skills does is build basic skill receptivity in team leaders, to conduct their team in a more cohesive way. So better listening, better questions, to be able to resolve daily conversations easily. And then, obviously difficult task is difficult task, but then how do you manage your daily chaos, daily home, home setting is what leader as a coach program do for the organization. So at least some bit of fabric starts changing by those programs, and there is a basic, the soil starts getting ready is how I'll put it. But being a coach, a neutral coach, like Ramesh said, and being a team leader who has coaching skills are two very, very different dynamics, which organizations are now understanding. It's not a replacement for anyone.
Also, just an interesting point to this conversation. A lot of millennials, Gen Z folks are joining work. In the past, the leader was the person who knew everything, was the subject matter expert who would tell the team, do this, do that. Now people expect leaders who are there only to look after themselves, as how do they grow, how do they learn, and remove impediments in their way, and give them that freedom to be who they are. So that is also a little bit of what I think Ramesh and Jaya referred to as, you kind of give them that liberty. So leaders as coaches has a lot of relevance in the industry there. And it's, if you are a leader who can hire people better than you, you'll be the smartest person in the world. So it's a different way.
Awesome. I think this is very engaging conversation, Ramesh. Nobody wants to leave this room, it seems. So, but we have time limitations, and I really want to thank you for taking up the time, sharing the case study. Lot of great learnings for everyone, and I hope we continue this learning journey together.
Thanks, Jaya, for having me here, and getting to meet this wonderful group. So I think other than one person in the group, I didn't know anybody else. So everybody is a
stranger.
Yeah, thanks for that.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for joining, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Great
Thank
session.
you.
Thank